Good afternoon. I'm Carla Balo from the Center for Automotive Research, and welcome to, I believe, the first ever joint webinar from MICHauto and Center for Automotive Research. And today we're going to be looking at the economic impact that COVID-19 has had on the automotive industry in Michigan, as well as on the economy of Michigan. And we're going to do it in two parts. The first part is going to be focused on the automotive OEMs and suppliers and the impact that it's had to their daily business, all through the shutdown, through their restart, and now the continuing ramifications and issues that they're facing on a daily basis, both economically and with their employees. And the second part is really going to be focused on the state and the state actions that have really helped support the automotive industry through this pandemic, and the actions that are ongoing as we go through recovery and hopefully someday return back to normal. Thank you very much for joining. Glenn?
Thanks, Carla, and a special thanks to you and your team. It's always good to work with you. We've known each other for a long time and certainly been on the phone a lot the last few months working on things together. So thanks to you and your team. Welcome, everybody. We're going to get to the program real quick. One piece of housekeeping. If you have a question, please put it into the chat box. You'll see that on the screen on the right, and we will capture those and pass them along to John. Before we get going, I wanted to bring attention to two projects and initiatives that we have with the MICHauto team, our partners in the Detroit Regional Chamber have been working on. You've probably seen them. If you haven't, I wanted to share them with you. The first on the left of your screen is a campaign that we launched last week, and this is a Work Smart, Play Smart campaign to keep our businesses and manufacturing open. And the objective here is really to reinforce the safety protocols that are working in our facilities and in our industry, but more importantly, as you go home and as you go into your communities, as you socialize, to keep those protocols top of mind at all times. So this is the purpose of the campaign, is to make sure that we're driving it really 24 hours a day, that we're vigilant about these things. So if you're interested more in that, you can see that at michauto.org. The other that goes hand in hand with this, we launched a few weeks ago through the Chamber, and we have now over 1,000 companies and people who've pledged to Mask Up Michigan. This hashtag actually was originated, I think back in May, by one of our panelists today, Senator McMurrow. That's where it originally came from. And it has spread, our governor has used it, and it has actually taken off. It's been encouraged nationally too. So I wanted to bring those to your attention today. And with that, we're going to jump right in. I don't think he needs an introduction, but John McElroy is a friend of the industry, and John has graciously agreed to be our host and our commentator today and our moderator. So John, we'll turn it over to you, and Carl and I will join you at the end. Thank you.
Thanks for that introduction, Glenn, and hello there to Carla as well. We've got a good panel here. Eric Wilds has already shown up first. He's the Chief Sales and Marketing Officer for Magna International. Deneen McDowell is the Manufacturing Executive Director for General Motors North America. And Kristen Balasia is Vice President and Managing Director for Automotive Advisory Services at IHS Markit. And Kristen, why don't I start with you first? We're talking about the impact of COVID and everything on the automotive industry. We saw sales devastated in March and April. May started to look better, June a little bit better than that. Now I'm getting conflicting signals as to whether it's going well in July or dropping off. I'd like to get your input on that. And going forward, did we just see a little bit of pent-up demand because of the downturn earlier in the spring? And maybe it's going to drop off in the fall? So I guess two questions there. Where do we stand in July, at least right now? And what's your forward forecast for the next quarter?
Thanks, John. I'm happy to be here. Thanks, Carla and Glenn, for having me. So I guess I'll take a little bit of a step back and just talk about, we're here to talk about the economic state of Michigan and the automotive industry. And I'll say that what we've seen, getting to answering your question, is how resilient and creative the players in the industry have been. We've seen the OEMs like Ford and GM get involved immediately, supporting the urgent need of providing and manufacturing and assembling ventilators. And although that may have been low or no margin, they were able to learn and gain those experiences necessary to bring vehicle production back up quickly and build out those policies and procedures. So if you look at, I mean, you talked about the devastating impact over the last several months, and you look at the light vehicle sales over March to May, for example, they were about 2.8 million. Corresponding production was only about 1.25 million. So we had about a $1.6 million gap or inventory reduction there that we had to cover. So as the OEMs have come back, they've been really on top of the data, the sales rate, and the future sales rate that's anticipated, focusing and prioritizing on those high margin, hot selling pickups and SUVs. And what we've seen is really strong sales and returns on the pickup segments, actually up about 1% year to date, year over year. And SUVs as well. Every week, we just keep seeing, more positive numbers and growth. And, some of that is pent-up demand and people that really haven't been able to get out and lease returns and things like that. But some of it is just need, as, people are needing to drive more. Maybe they took mass transportation, maybe they plan to, fly, and now they're driving and they need a safe, reliable vehicle to drive further and take their family. So, we definitely see some positive signs. Our forecast for the US right now sits at 13.3 million, which is down about 21% where we thought it was going to be at the beginning of the year, when I think everyone was pretty optimistic and hopeful for a pretty solid year. So I think we see positive signs. We think, cautiously optimistic that, this is going to be definitely a deeper recession than we saw in the last, dip and financial crisis in 2008 and 9, but hopefully shorter. And so, the industry is gearing up and really trying to watch the inventory, work with their dealers to get that out there and support the sales. But it's uncertain. You hear even as of yesterday, right? Our governor doing some, minimal reclosing activities, but looking at that and across the nation, as we see, cases of COVID increasing in some cases, those are just things we can't predict yet. So based on what we know right now, I mean, it's moving in the right direction, but there's still so much uncertainty. So it's really going to be important that the OEMs stay close to the sales rate and on which specific vehicles, and that they have the right production plans and worker availability on hand to be able to support that demand. So again, about 13.3 million for the year. Just, I think everyone's taking every month and every quarter, month by month.
Yeah, a lot of uncertainty, as you say, Kristen. Eric, I'm curious. Magna, of course, one of the biggest suppliers out there. What are you hearing from the OEMs? Are they approaching this very cautiously, or are they just trying to ramp stuff back up quickly?
When we came out of the COVID on May 11th in Michigan, when we were able to start back up, I think all the communications we had from our customers was they saw the pent-up demand, and they all wanted to start as fast as they could and ramp up and make sure not only Magna, but the entire supply base was ready to go. And even the communications we get now, I'd agree with Kristen, right? On the trucks and the SUVs, the focus, even if you look at schedules through the shutdown periods where they would normally have shutdowns, they're continuing to run. We see a lot of positive pull, at least right now, trying to make the second half of the year stronger than the first. I appreciate your comments on July and what's kind of the mixed review, but when we're looking at the forecast and we're talking to the OEMs, we do see a stronger half of the year. And of course, we're talking with Kristen's team as well to get their input on what we're looking at. But if I look at it, we tried to do an assessment, and I'd say, and I'll just say it's an opinion, but we see the second half of the year running about 90% to what we were forecasting at the beginning of the year. So a very strong second half and compared to what happened in Q1 and Q2.
Yeah. And I got to believe that, it's a mixed bag, not just with your your different customers, but in the product lines that they make as well. As Kristen mentioned, trucks doing pretty good, but I got to imagine there's other places where it's a real scramble for you guys in terms of how much you build and ship to the automakers.
Yeah, if you look at just our normal business, right? I think that's a trend that we're always contending with. You know, we have a variety of all the customers in North America. We have all the different vehicle types and segments. So some are stronger, some are less. We fortunately have a strong focus on our products for trucks and SUVs, which works out well for Magna. But in general, right, that fluctuation is part of the industry. And as we look, we're looking to make sure that we're in the best position to support the fluctuations and be strong where we're ramping up, and at the other time, you know, finding ways to mitigate some of the lower segments, the lower volume segments.
Gotcha. Deneen, how goes the battle out there? I mean, what a nightmare to have to deal with all these protocols in your plants. General Motors had the advantage of being located in China and seeing what was going on there and knowing what it had to do in the US. I was intrigued too by GM being able to implement these protocols in the manufacturing of ventilators and the like. But we've seen in certain plants that there's been pushback by the UAW and some of the workers. And just give us an update. How do you stand right now in dealing with this pandemic and trying to manufacture automobiles?
Hi, John. So first off, I want to just touch on what Kristen said. You know, during the pandemic, as we were closing operations down at the end of March, you know, I included with an army of folks were going to Kokomo, Indiana to go build ventilators. So, you know, from the learnings from IO, as well as implementing the protocol with our multi-layered approach in building ventilators, I'd say we got a lot of good understanding of what our COVID-19 playbook should be. And I think everyone recognizes our priorities are first, keep our team members healthy and safe, so they go home, keep their family safe and their community safe. So, you know, our people understand our first priority is don't let the virus on site. You know, don't spread it, and contain it if it happens to come on site. We don't catch it through our entry protocol. So I would say, you know, once we brought people back around May 18th, that week, we did a survey and we spent a lot of time preparing people for what the new normal would look like when you came back to General Motors to work, in terms of our entry protocol, masks, sanitizing, social distancing, in everything that we needed to do to protect our people. And we did a survey, we did a poll after people were in work for 3 days. We said, first, do you think our protocol is effective? 94% said yes. We asked, do you understand your role back to the original point when this was kicked off? Like, we're all in this together. Everyone's got a role. You know, if I protect me, I'm protecting you, quite frankly. And do you understand your role in the process? 95% said yes. So I think everyone is very comfortable and they understand why we're doing what we're doing, because, you know, our first priority is our safety. Our second priority is to protect our livelihood. And our team members recognize that. So I just want to thank them all in advance for what they do every day.
Yeah, Deneen, how do you adjust for this? I mean, I've got to believe that, you know, with masks and gloves and separation and all that, working on an assembly line is going to impact productivity, potentially even quality. Have you seen those kinds of impacts, and how have you been able to deal with it?
Yeah, so first off, our COVID-19 protocol will not impact quality. I mean, our team members, they still understand their standardized work and what expectations they need to meet. I would say it's been a headwind relative to, you know, the protocol we need to put in place. Masks, positive note, we're making masks in Warren, Michigan. We build 50,000 masks a day, over 1.5 million in a month. So, you know, Mary took an it's on me approach in terms of we're going to figure this out. So we build masks in multiple locations globally for our people and for the community. So that's really cool. And then obviously we needed to make sure from an entry protocol standpoint that we had the proper protocol in terms of making sure people socially distance when they come on site, they sanitize. You know, we asked the screening questions And if someone doesn't pass the temperature check, how to handle it, get your mask, and then, go forward with, other things in terms of ventilation. So there's a lot of different layers to this, but I would say, all the planning we did from the learnings in IO, from what we learned in Kokomo, started making masks, we've continuously improved it. And we listen to our people too on how to drive improvements as well. So it's been iterative, and we will learn and grow as, because it's not going to end anytime soon.
Yeah, no, unfortunately, you're right on that. Kristen, let's go back to you. You mentioned that you might see 90% of sales recovery by the end of the year. That's still a big hole, though. That's 10%. Yeah. That's probably about 1.7 million units down. That's what probably represents 8 different assembly plants worth of capacity taken out. But my question, though, is where do you see the shortfall? Is it with the daily rental companies? Hertz has filed for bankruptcy. Business travel has all but evaporated. Where do you see that missing gap coming from?
Mm-hmm. That's certainly an impact, but I think the uncertainty affects, how we all travel, so the rental industry, but it affects consumer confidence. It affects, what we're going to buy, when we're going to buy it, how we want to buy it. There's been, much like Deneen was talking about the manufacturing environment, there's been a whole new process to shop for and purchase a vehicle, right? So we look at that and how, just kind of to bring it back and give Michigan a few plugs here, the dealers in Michigan have done some really interesting and creative things. There was a dealership in Livonia, Michigan, who cleared out their showroom and held a blood drive for a few days to stay connected with the community, start putting some of those, policies and equipment in place to interact safely. There's been a big investment in digitization of the whole process. And I think whether it's with the OEMs and certainly with the dealer networks, what we've been talking to them about for years, probably, this kind of retail transformation or new retail, everyone had it as a conversation piece, but it has been significantly accelerated. And if we look at filling those gaps, we need to understand the reason why some people aren't coming back yet, how to get people to come back sooner. We just announced that the average age of the vehicles on the road right now is 11.9 years, and because of this COVID and the entire situation, that could extend to another 4 to 6 months longer. So when you look at really just the broad impact that COVID has had, it's affecting who's driving, how they're driving, how they're shopping. So there's a lot of moving parts, and we're currently doing a global study on why and how people are, shopping, buying, and what's likely to continue. We talk a lot about what's going to stick, and Deneen, I think you rightly mentioned, we're not out of this. We don't know, next quarter, next year, what this is going to look like and what we're going to have in place to continue to support sales and support an environment where people feel safe and comfortable, and frankly, that it's also efficient and friendly to shop and buy a vehicle. And so, will the concierge services stick? Will I not have to go into a dealership anymore? Will I really have an endless or a seamless end-to-end process to buy a vehicle? And would that actually increase people's propensity to buy a vehicle? I mean, I know personally there's times when it's tough to get to a dealership to go do some test drives and buy a vehicle. Would somebody buy one sooner, more likely, if it was just an easier process? So I think there's a lot of things to consider, and a lot of actually opportunities that could come out of this crisis that could help the industry come out better in the end and really drive innovation across the manufacturing and sales and marketing landscape.
Yeah, and speaking of opportunities, Eric, do you see opportunities? So, for example, are you picking up at Magna that maybe consumers want different things in their car, something that could sanitize it or make sure that they just feel more comfortable? And maybe not just in their personal cars, but if we're going to go back to ride hailing or using taxis and the like. Any thoughts along the lines of that at Magna?
Well, I think when we look at a lot of the trends, and you look at COVID, definitely has introduced some new technical and business challenges that we all have to contend with. But the focus you know, the primary focus coming out of COVID, and it's as everyone is saying, right, is how do you keep people safe and healthy? And whether it's in using a vehicle, whether it's in building a vehicle, whether it's in working in the office, we all have the same focus. And what we see is, John, I agree with you, the industry is going to have to address some of these challenges for ride hailing and ride sharing. We saw a drop off in the usage of those services based on concerns and where consumers are. So the industry, we have to figure out how do we address those concerns? How do we present situations that make people feel that they're safe and that they can continue to use these services? And then we think it, you know, it can bounce back. But what's interesting, you look at that piece, I don't know about everybody else's home, but the number of deliveries that come to my house now, we see a different, you know, an expansion potentially in the delivery infrastructure, and what some of those opportunities may present too as another expansion of business opportunities to where we focus. So,
Gotcha,
you know, when you balance that and then you look at some of the other trends, and maybe just to go a little bit further, we look at electrification and ADAS, you know, all long-term trends, all trends that we're still focused on. I think one of the things when we primary focus was, you know, people safety. How do we bring people back and keep them healthy? But at the same time, we all have the long-term strategies to keep an eye on where are we going in the future, and how do we make sure that the business today, right, is sustainable through that whole period of time.
Yeah, thanks. Deneen, we've got to wrap this up, but any last words of something that you'd like to contribute to the conversation?
Just, I'd say to address the pandemic is a team sport, and we all need to do our part. And I thought Glenn's words were very good at the beginning. It's just not when you're at work, it's when you're at home and when you're in the community. And the more we as individuals can protect the herd or the whole, I think it'll be better for everyone involved. So I appreciate everyone's support, and General Motors appreciates the community and the people that make us great and who we are. So thank you.
Deneen, what a great way to wrap that up. Fighting COVID is a team sport. There ought to be a bumper sticker.
Yeah.
So
Very good.
thanks for that, Deneen and Eric and Kristen and all. We're going to wrap that up with this point, and we're going to start the second panel.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
All right, and joining us for the second panel, we've got Kristen Dijek. She's Vice President at the Center for Automotive Research. Josh Hunt is Executive Vice President and Chief Business Development Officer for the Michigan Economic Development Corporation. And Mallory McMorrow is a Senator with the state of Michigan. Hello, everybody out there.
Hello. Hello.
Good to have you on board with this. There's a lot that we want to talk about, but I guess, Mallory, why don't I start with you? Michigan hasn't done that bad of a job. You know, we started out with a terrible situation, seemed to get that under control. Now there's a little bit iffy stuff going on. How do we get the state of Michigan to be more like South Korea, like Germany, like New Zealand, which really got their hands around this COVID issue?
Absolutely. And thank you for leading off with that as the first question. Andy Slavitt, who is the founder of the United States of Care and was the previous acting administrator of the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, had a phenomenal Twitter thread that I posted, and I'm happy to reshare on my thread, that says that exact same thing, that at any moment in time, we are only 4 to 6 weeks away from containing this if we want to. And I think particularly when we think about the automotive industry, this is a global industry. So we can look to countries like Germany, who have really controlled this well, who are largely reopened, New Zealand, who you see the festivals and fairs and nobody's wearing a mask. And we look at that kind of with this desire of wanting to get back there. But it is about will, and it's about all of us banding together, taking this very, very seriously. And I think adapting this mentality that we're effectively at war, and an attack on one of us is an attack on all of us. So if we treat this with that kind of rally mentality, and we make sure that all of us are wearing a mask every time we go out in public spaces, particularly indoors, For those of us who work in office environments, that we are continuing to keep people working remotely if we can. That's a majority of people who do work on computers who can continue to do that, that we social distance. We can reopen and we can get back to the things that we love. And I think that's really empowering. The governor has made a lot of news for her aggressive stance on this. And it's almost hard to remember how bad of a place we were in March and early April. We were, third highest in fatalities and cases in the country, despite only being the 10th largest state. But we've really controlled that. It's a challenge when we don't have a national strategy, but I think Michigan has been leading here, and we can continue to do that if we all get on this mentality. And I think most people have, because the governor's executive orders wouldn't have worked if 10 million people around the state didn't take it seriously, didn't tamp down, didn't stay home, and really get that curve under control. So it's about understanding what we did well and keeping that going. We are all on one team against this thing.
Yeah, Josh, let's continue that, because we're talking about policies and, the impact that policies can have on fighting this. What are the specific things that you would like to see the state follow in terms, and, we'll tie it in with the auto industry, helping the automotive industry get through this, and not just the traditional OEMs, traditional suppliers, but also the startups too, which we're really trying to inculcate in the state?
Well, that's a great question. I think Senator McMorrow made an important point here that we are all one team on this, and this isn't a matter of helping the economy or helping the health situation. The best way to help the economy is for everybody to mask up and is for everybody to follow the guidelines that are in place so that we can get to the recovery phase from the environment that we're in by all being a part of that same team. And so strategically, what we have been focused on at the MEDC over the last several months now has been a focus on supporting our small businesses across the state. And that can be small businesses that are our Main Street businesses that have been hard hit by the challenges that we face today. But it's also been supporting small businesses, small manufacturers, and small technology companies in the automotive and mobility spaces as well. And we've supported those companies through programs like our Pure Michigan Business Connect Access and Retooling Grant, which perfectly exemplified the way the economy and the healthcare challenges come together. And this was a grant program that helped 12 small businesses quickly retool and utilize that retooling to manufacture 5.5 million pieces of PPE. And it's programs like that that have both helped the health situation and helped the economy that have been the focus of ours for small businesses. And what we want to continue on is continue to highlight the importance of the automotive industry and the mobility industry, and that Michigan continues to be the best place to do automotive work as we get out of this situation. And that was highlighted yesterday. Michigan, again, for many consecutive years, was named by Business Facilities Magazine as the top state for automotive. And that's something that we all know, but needs to be continued to be known across the country. And so we'll continue to focus on the automotive industry and continue to support small businesses, both here in the relief stage and as we move into the recovery stage as well.
Yeah, thanks, Joshua. Kristen, you look at more than just Michigan, and you look at many regions of the country. As you look out there, are there lessons learned that we could borrow from other states? Are there things that we're doing that they should be looking at? And again, from the viewpoint of how do we help the state and the automotive industry cope with this COVID crisis?
Well, I think, one of the things we've learned from this, not just that doing the right thing for health is doing the right thing for the economy, as was just mentioned, but also that we are all so connected. And especially in this industry where, there's a remarkable orchestration of 30,000 parts come from all over the world to one place, and in a matter of, less than an hour are assembled into a vehicle that may last for decades. And largely is going to operate error-free. We don't have that in that kind of complexity in just about any other industry. And our connections to China, to Mexico, to the southern U.S. are really, really important to maintaining the production here in Michigan as well. And I think Michigan has done a tremendous job. We did drop into the COVID spike early, and did a tremendous job to tamp that down and to flatten our curve. But we need to stay connected and continue to lead the way for those other states and other countries. You know, it would be great to be New Zealand, and if we're 4 to 6 weeks away from being New Zealand, I'll stay home another 6 weeks. I've not left my house really since March, but you know, I think the big lesson here is just how connected everything is, and how we need to have these you know, compacts with the other Great Lakes states. I know that the governor has been in contact with the industry leaders and governmental leaders in Mexico and Canada about how we keep the flow of parts. We need healthy workers, a healthy supply chain, and healthy demand to keep this industry going. And I think we're, you know, really doing a great job of that and leading the nation.
Mhm. Mallory, one of the things that concerns me for all 50 states is how much money they're burning through right now. Unlike the federal government, they can't just print money as needed. We've got to balance our budget. As Doneen in the prior panel mentioned, fighting COVID is a team sport. Is there anything that you see going on where we can get federal assistance? Because if not, it looks like we're going to have to take an axe to the state budget.
Absolutely. And, you know, despite all of the partisan bickering, and it is an election year and we are getting closer, I have been always incredibly pleased with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle, particularly when it comes to the budget. We've been able to strike bipartisan agreements. Everybody comes to the table. But Michigan is no different than any other state in the country right now, where if we don't get additional federal assistance, the state of Michigan was looking at a $6.1 billion shortfall over the next few years. And exactly to your point, we have to have a balanced budget. There were some restrictions in the CARES Act funding that prevented us from using some of those dollars to backfill our budget holes. So, you know, I think the pressure is really starting to bubble up to members of the United States Senate and Congress, particularly because as we see this virus spread, particularly around the country, this isn't a red state versus a blue state thing. It is hitting everywhere. It is hitting some of maybe the more right-leaning states a little bit later than we are, but I think that reality is sinking in, that we are going to need additional assistance, as every state will. But Michigan's budget hole comparatively is not that large compared to some other states. So I'm very hopeful. I'm hopeful that that will happen. I know many of my colleagues on both sides of the aisle in the state are now advocating for that. That was one of the agreements with the governor, is that we will continue to advocate with our members of Congress to come to some sort of an agreement on additional funding, because without that, I mean, we are going to be in a very, very tough spot. But we are no different than any other state around the country.
Mm-hmm. And Joshua, what do you see that the state needs in terms of being able to retrain workers? I think the COVID impact has accelerated the need for that. We're an industry in transition, electrification, autonomy, connectivity, and the like. We've got a great workforce based in the traditional way of doing things, but as we know, that's going away. Where do you see the state needing to really step it up in terms of home growing our own talent?
Well, that's a great question. And I think what's important to note is, as you said, we already have such a great workforce in so many different ways here in Michigan, with the highest concentration of engineers, with a very strong manufacturing and skilled trades workforce. And it's important to continue to build on those strengths that we have for the automotive industry and for other industries as well. But then we also need to take that to the next level. We have a very important need for continuing to grow our tech talent here in the state, especially around software engineering, and seeing as more and more automotive jobs, as well as jobs outside of the automotive industry, require that different type of engineering or different type of technology skill set than we have been known for in the past. We graduate a lot of great students in those fields, and we need to make sure that we put the environment in place to keep those students here as well. And a lot of that continues to be around building vibrant communities and building communities where people want to live, and focusing on our people and communities in that way, as well as just ensuring that we are focused every day on talking about the importance of at all levels what the importance of technology and math and science are for our students as they're coming up through our education system. As we have this great workforce here today, we need to make sure that we continue to build it, and that's part of the goal of the new Office of Future Mobility and Electrification that the governor put in place, where we need to make sure that Michigan is the home of automotive and mobility for the next century, just like we've been under the previous century. And that's where having Trevor Paul in place as our Chief Mobility Officer is dedicated every day to making sure that we are leading in this space, and that we're not only competing with the likes of the southern US and Ohio and Mexico, but that we're also now competing for these technology jobs with Silicon Valley and Austin, Texas. And we need to hit on all these different areas of our talented workforce to continue to lead in that space.
Yeah, in fact, we just had Trevor Paul on one of my shows, Autoline After Hours, a week ago. So great conversation about where the state's going from a mobility standpoint. Kristen, let's continue that conversation of what Joshua was just talking about, but take it to labor. You've got great tie-ins with the UAW. You've got a great sense of what's going on the labor front. How do we make sure that our workforce on the shop floor is trained and ready to go for all this new technology that's coming into the industry?
Well, I think, this is a place where Michigan actually has a strength in having a strong UAW represented workforce in our assembly plants, assembly engine components, and many of the parts suppliers as well. The UAW plays a pretty proactive role in training its workforce and making sure that there's health and safety training, that there's job specific training, and that they're keeping an eye on the future of technology change. I know I've met with them a number of times, and they've been doing these tours around the globe actually to see, how do companies implement these new technologies? What does Industry 4.0 look like? How does it change job content? And, they're engaged with a project that I was just on this week with Massachusetts Institute of Technology is looking at future of work and how these technologies are changing mobility here in Southeast Michigan. And the UAW is represented there as well. I think, they're really keeping an eye on where the future is going, and that engagement of the workforce is going to be key to making sure that we do have the folks who can make that leap. I think, another point that I was thinking about when we were talking about the state budget, all of our companies have really been hit hard by this shutdown, and many of them tapped their credit lines and issued new debt, and we've got some cash out there that they're watching it burn as we restart the industry. And certain companies are burning a little faster than others because they've got new product launches coming. But we've got to look at where that puts us on the technology forefront. And we know that many of the electric and electrified vehicles are still on pace. They're not, haven't seen a lot of pullback from that. But automation and full vehicle autonomy, there has been some question about where is that going to land, and is the investment going to continue as aggressively as it did before when there's less cash to be had. We're looking to see what might happen on a federal level to help investment in those future technologies so the U.S. remains fully competitive on the technology front as well.
Yeah, Kristen, one thing, you might pull your microphone down just a little bit. We're getting a little bit of
a little pop.
A little pop there. Yeah. Mallory, let's continue with that. Education, so critically important. Amazon, a little over a year and a half ago, was looking for a second headquarters. Detroit was on the list, and then it got brushed off the list because we're not able to grow enough of our own homegrown talent. Our schools are simply not competitive, to be blunt about it. A key reason, I believe, is we don't spend nearly as much money on education as a lot of other states do on a per student basis. Is there anything that we can do about that? I'm just wondering, what the future of the state is if we cannot get our education system to be amongst the top 10.
Yeah, I don't even think it's a question of if there's something we can do about it. I think it's we have to. We absolutely have to invest in education and our future talent workforce. Or one of the things that I've been a very loud advocate for is that if we don't lead here, particularly around electrification, automation, and bringing those tech talent jobs combined with our auto industry, we may lose our signature industry to the likes of Silicon Valley and Austin and even China, who's investing very, very heavily in this space. So I think there's some silver linings. You look at the number of FIRST robotics teams that we have in all of our schools. We lead the country there. And Michigan used to be up there with Massachusetts in having the best education system in the entire country. And I think Amazon was an interesting wake-up call for us because it was an experiment, that they ran throughout the entire country. And they came back and told us we were ready with a $4 billion incentive package, but we didn't even crack the top 20 because we didn't have the talent and we didn't have the transit to connect, Metro Detroit with the city itself. And then you look at Virginia, which won an Amazon HQ2 headquarters, and they offered an $800 million incentive, which is not insignificant, but also invested in a new campus of Virginia Tech, and they improved the infrastructure in the area. So I think as we move forward in Michigan, thinking about, as our budgets are going to be tight, particularly over the next few years, how do we get smarter about our incentives so that they're holistic and that every time we're looking at an economic development project, we're making sure that we are prioritizing talent development, education, and absolutely making sure that we are investing in our schools and our talent moving forward. And I've been very, very pleased to see in the negotiations so far that we have prioritized education funding as a state. Even in our last budget negotiation, there's a net $256 million gain for our K-12 schools.
Oh, that's great to hear. Thanks for that update there. Joshua, what are the lessons learned from this pandemic? Because before COVID-19 broke out, we had been warned by the disease experts that pandemics were going to run through the world. We should be ready for them. We weren't ready for this one. Undoubtedly, as I said, the experts are predicting there will be future pandemics. What do you think we learned out of this? What are some of the lessons we got to take forward to be ready for the next?
I think one of the lessons that we learned from this is the importance of resiliency and equity in our economy. That's something on the economic side that we learned from this. And it's interesting, about a year ago, the MEDC launched a new 5-year strategic plan, and it was a strategic plan built around being a fast-growing economy, a resilient economy, and an equitable economy. And I think especially the resiliency and equity measures of that plan, while they were extremely important when they were written down last year, are something that have just become exponentially more important in the world that we're in today than we were a year ago. We need to make sure that our small businesses are resilient in terms of the planning and in terms of the markets that they are in. We need to make sure that our talent is resilient and able to adjust to some of the jobs of the future, whether it's related to Industry 4.0 or automation or electrification or other industries like that. And we need to make sure that we have an equitable economy so that individuals across all areas of the state and from all different backgrounds can equally partake in the economy, and that we don't see a situation where some people gain and some people lose, but that we can all succeed together in the equity of the economy moving forward. And that's why, as a part of this plan, we've been focused on making sure that the economic development projects that we are working on focus on what we're calling good jobs and promising jobs. And so that these are jobs that have a long-term future, that can get people into jobs that can meet the needs of their family, and that they can be a fully participating member of the economy. And so to me, those two things around the importance of equity and the importance of resiliency in many different ways are the two of the biggest lessons that we took away from this.
Yeah, thanks for that, Joshua. Kristen, same question. What do you think are some of the lessons that we should be taking out of this, especially from a policy standpoint, looking towards the future and potentially other pandemics?
Well, we've been fortunate in the United States that there have been other pandemics that have been contained in other parts of the world. SARS, the first SARS, COVID, was a very small outbreak, very impactful in Asia. we've managed to, contain and work very closely with other governments around Ebola. And, I think that engagement in that international community on international health is a really key thing that has protected us for a long time. And it's true that we haven't seen the last of the pandemics. And I really appreciate what Josh was just talking about, the resiliency and equity issues that we're looking to. When we've had major disruptions in the United States before, I think about Hurricane Katrina in my beloved city of New Orleans and the surrounding communities in Louisiana, and how inequitable things were after that, and what happened to public schools in that region of the country, and how this major disruption just turned everything on its head and made things more inequitable. I think if we're purposeful going forward and know that already to start with, that we can plan a more equitable and just future for our state.
Well, good. With that, we're going to have to wrap up this segment. I want to thank all of you, Joshua, Mallory, Kristen, for sharing your ideas on this. And I want to commend the Center for Automotive Research and MICHauto for putting these panels together, because it's discussions like this that's going to bring all our collective thoughts together to be able to get our way through this thing and hopefully get back to great growth again. So thank you all, and I'll turn it back over to Glenn and to Carla.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
John, thank you. Carla, thank you. Before I ask Carla to wrap up, I just want to pick up on a couple things that I heard that made a big impact today. First of all, something that Deneen said. She said it is about safety first, and I don't think anybody has any question about that. But the other thing she said, it's about protecting our livelihood, and that was the purpose of the conversation today. This industry is a $225 billion industry to our state economy. It's an extremely big part of our livelihood, past, present, and future. And as Mallory said, their future is going to depend on our tech talent. And as Josh said, it's going to depend on having the right toolkit to attract businesses. And the thing I would stress that Mallory also said is we have to have a rally mentality. And what that means, and that's why we work so closely with CAR and other associations in our legislature every week, is having a resiliency. So I am encouraged by what we're all doing and that we're all in this together. And I want to thank John and the panelists today for joining us. So Carla, I'll let you wrap it up. Thank you.
Thanks, Glenn. This has been our first time working together, and I can't begin to explain how meaningful and thoughtful the conversations that we just listened to, and the impact that it had, and the learnings that I perceived from the speakers. Thank you to the speakers. Thank you to John for his excellent moderation. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. I'd like to remind everybody that next week we have management briefing seminars, August 4th and 5th. You can still register. We're going to be talking about all of this and more. And if you go to www.cargroup.org, events MBS, you can find the registration link there. So thank you again to everyone. And we'll wrap up this first webinar.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good day. Be well.
Thank you.